On the other hand, here's math and science literacy in the world, and the red bar is the United States. So our students are worse. They're below average for the world. They're worse than Lithuania, worse than Russia, worse than Hungary, worse than the Czech Republic, worse than Slovenia. Right? Yeah. In the 60s, we were number one in the world in math and science, and now we're below average in math and science, which is bad if you believe Romer, and what matters most is creating new inventions. Right? So Romer says the most important thing you can do is invent new stuff. Well, you need math and science people to do that, and we're bad at that now. Among women science, we're 31st in the world in producing women scientists, right? Our women scientists, our women students in the United States are 31st in the world among all the countries in the world in science and math. Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Liechtenstein are all above us. The Czech Republic is better, okay? And again, we're well below average in female scores. On the other hand, and again, I keep doing that just because you know the other hand joke by now, hopefully, we're way low in math and science scores. So the red bar is math and science scores. Here's the United States, right? On the other hand, the blue bar is the interest in kids in being entrepreneurs. So of all the countries in the world, our students in the U.S. are the most interested, and they think themselves the most capable of being entrepreneurs, of actually doing something, starting something, okay? And it's an interesting mix here because in the last 10 years, there's been a bunch of billion-dollar corporations created, a bunch of corporations that are worth $1 billion or more in the United States. Half of those, one of the people who start the company is an immigrant. So we have this huge percentage of immigrants starting these major companies, right? One of the guys who started Google's Russian, right? One of the Google guys is Russian. We see that constantly in these things. These new startups have people who aren't citizens of the United States, who are immigrants in them, who are going to school in the United States and then start something. So the U.S. is tied for 23rd in reading scores, tied for 39th in math scores, and in 25th place in science scores. Well, that sucks for the long-term future of the United States. That's horrible. We got to do something about that. Okay. Another smiley dead economist is a man named Joseph Schumpeter. Yes, Schumpeter. Schumpeter. Say it with me. Schumpeter. He wrote several books. The most famous of these is called Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. This is 100 years ago. Okay? He was really maybe the first economist to really write about entrepreneurship and invention and innovation and how it works and why it's important. It's a really good book. And he invents a really cool phrase in it called creative destruction. He really believes in capitalism. He also believes that capitalism in the end is going to destroy itself, that the rich people are going to take away the freedoms and everything of the poor people, right? They're going to screw over all the poor people to the point that they disintegrate the nature of capitalism. But ignoring that you shouldn't trust rich people, creative destruction is this great idea. We are always in capitalism in competition with each other. At least that's the theory. Or we're at least worried about being in competition with somebody. And because of that, we have to keep coming up with new ideas. But to implement those new ideas, we have to destroy something. So if you want to put the automobile in, you want to start people driving cars, you're going to blow up this whole industry that's built around horses because everybody's riding horses. Now we don't need horses anymore. So there's fewer horse breeders and fewer horse doctors. There's all these services that went on for horses that all of a sudden we don't need anymore. There's a new industry that comes in and it destroys an old industry in the process. Okay? And this can be disruptive to the economy. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But capitalism is constantly, we always talk in Las Vegas, we always reinvent ourselves. Well, that's what capitalism does. If capitalism is working right, it's constantly reinventing itself. It's wiping out old industries, it's putting in new industries. That means some people are constantly being displaced from their jobs, other people are coming in. In the 1950s, most people who went from the U.S. to Europe went by boat, and there were all these really cool boats that sailed, and there were these races between, the United States and Norway and England of who had the coolest boats and the fastest boats well, jet airplanes just wiped that out. So when we get to the early 60s, the boat industry just goes away. In like 3 years, the boat industry is gone. Those ships are gone. The whole industry is gone. And you don't take a ship captain and stick him in a cockpit of an airplane and say, hey, fly that now. Right? No, you get airline pilots, you get pilots to fly the airplane, and the boat captain is unemployed. Okay? So you destroy this one industry to create a new one. When computers came in, they destroyed a whole bunch of stuff. They destroyed a whole bunch of old jobs. They destroyed a whole bunch of old companies. We don't buy typewriters anymore. I keep saying that, but Smith Corona was a really big company, and they're gone. One of IBM's the biggest businesses was building typewriters. It's gone. So you destroy one industry to get another. It's called creative destruction. In Schumpeter's mind, this is a really great element of capitalism, that you're not stuck doing the same thing for 100 years at a time. You're constantly putting in new things, getting rid of old things, cleaning out the old stuff, and that should, over the long run, just make you bigger and stronger and better. Okay? Creative destruction. All right. So based on all this stuff we just talked about, how do we promote growth? Well, we need to protect people's property rights. We need to make sure that corruption is not a huge issue. We need to protect our intellectual property. We need to protect our patents, protect copyrights, lessen corruption. On the other hand, I say that, but I can show you some economists who are on the very far right who think that creative destruction would work better if we didn't have patents. So in other words, you invent a new drug. Right now, you get that drug for 17 years, and you're the only company that can produce that drug for 17 years. There are really far-right economists who believe we'd be better off not having patents. So you invent the new drug, and a year later, 10 other companies are producing it, and you've lost that advantage. And their theory is that, hey, instead of knowing you don't have to invent another drug for 17 years, now you know you have to keep inventing new drugs all the time. Okay? So even when most economists would say, how we do patents and copyrights is very important, and it protects how we protect intellectual property is very important. There's other debates in that. If you go on in economics and you take, let's say, Econ 321, you'll talk about the debates in the entertainment industry about whether copyrights are too long, which they probably are, and they're actually discouraging creativity. There are lawyers in the United States who quite literally have taken hundreds of thousands of songs that have been written over the years, and they loaded them into their computer, and they have a little artificial intelligence program, and every time a new song comes out, they run their artificial intelligence on it to see if it's like some other song from 40 years ago. And if it is, then they'll sue, right? Taylor Swift gets sued. Every hit song she gets, somebody sues her claiming that it's their song. Avril Lavigne, every song she puts out, she gets sued. Every big artist gets sued for every song they write. Yes, Adele came out with a song that's Hello. Well, Lionel Richie had a song with the Commodores years ago, started out, Hello. And people thought he should have sued her. It can be stifling. If the protection is too strong, then it can stifle the rest of the industry. So you have to have the right amount of intellectual property protection. Number two, you need to have good healthcare and educational system. Right? The United States spends twice as much per person on healthcare as the Western European countries do, and we don't get any better results. They get just as good results as we do, and they spend half as much money. And we already saw that our education system is simply not producing the right numbers anymore. You want to encourage innovation. You want the government to do things to encourage innovation. So you want to give tax breaks to research. You want to spend money on research. You want to encourage people to be innovative and creative. And then you want to push savings and then the turning of that savings into investment. Right? Those are. Now, there's all these other countries in the world that are below us in GDP. Will they catch up? What? Japan, Korea, by, the early 90s, they had pretty much caught up. Or they'd caught up to where they were, 2/3 of us. And they haven't really closed the gap since. And let me think about the world that you live in. As you start to catch up, as your economy booms, as you create new stuff, which China is doing now, you start building a middle class in your society. Well, those folks want higher wages and they want healthcare systems. I have a friend from China and she's like, if we get sick, we die if we don't have enough money to pay for it. Well, China's not going to catch the United States in per person real GDP without changing that, without having some kind of healthcare system that's available as part of their economy. Okay? As your country gets richer, you stop. Japan used to be the country that made cheap stuff. They had to stop that. At some point, to make their income continue to go up, they had to stop making cheap stuff and start making good stuff. China's the country that makes cheap stuff, and they realize that they have to stop making cheap stuff and start making better stuff, and they actually have a plan to do that, which means that the cheap stuff moves to Vietnam and Cambodia and maybe into Africa or Central America. It's going to move to other places, and somebody else is going to be the maker of cheap stuff. It's not hard. It doesn't seem like, if you have the right plan, it's not hard to catch up a lot of the way, but it's really hard to catch up that last little bit. Okay? Because you really have to fundamentally change your economy as you boom, and it can be hard to do. Right? As the old saying goes, just when you think you're winning the rat race, along come faster rats. All right. So we have countries that, you're not supposed to say they're poor countries. You're not supposed to say, we used to say they were third world countries. We usually use this term developing, something like that. Makes it sound nicer. We're into that sounding nicer. But again, we have huge parts of the world where people are barely surviving, where they don't have clean water and they don't have access to any health care system, and they're barely making it in keeping themselves fed and clothed, and they're probably not fed very well, and kids are starving to death, and there's billions of people in that boat across the planet Earth. Warren Buffett, I think I already said this to you, but Warren Buffett, who's one of the world's richest people, said, if you're born in the United States, you already won the lottery, because poor folks in the United States generally are far better off than billions and billions and billions of people all across the planet Earth. So the traditional model says, why do these countries not grow? And one of the basic reasons these countries don't grow is in many of these countries there's a problem of corruption or a lack of law. If you have a country like Somalia where there's nobody to enforce a contract, if you want somebody to come in and build a factory in your country, you want somebody outside the country to come in and build a factory and create jobs. Well, why would you do that in a country where you can't enforce a contract? There's, wars and revolutions going on all the time. Right? Why? We had, in certain parts of the world, there's constantly problems with gangs or revolutions or wars or, rebels, and if you're a company and you're thinking about investing, you're going to wait until everything settles out. And if it never really settles out, or it keeps settling out where the system is corrupt, then why would you invest in that country? Okay? Number whatever, poor education and health systems, you need a labor force. You need people who can work. And why would you put your factory somewhere where you have to train your employees? If you take a country where most of your employees can't do math and can't write, can't read, you'd have to train them. Why would you put your factory there, right? Look at what Costa Rica did. The country invested heavily in education, educated its labor force, and then it was able to attract major companies from the United States to come in because those companies saw this educated, trained workforce sitting there waiting for them. Okay? And then low savings rates. All right? So the traditional model says poor countries tend to be that way, developing countries tend to be that way because there's corruption or wars, revolutions, not a very strong education system, and not enough savings. All right? There are going to be people who dispute this, however.